Caregiving for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia holds its own special challenges. Jennifer Fink of the Fading Memories podcast is with us today to share her caregiving experience. You're connected with the Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Fenter here with Helen Bauer.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
I have a feeling there are a lot of people out there who understand what Jennifer Fink has been through.
I think so.
Because there is an increasing population of people who are being diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementias.
So their caregiving population. So what we know that there are approximately 55 million unpaid caregivers across the United States. The percentage of those caregivers who are caring for Alzheimer's and dementia patients or people with Alzheimer's and dementia is also growing, that caregiving group. So Jennifer Fink is the perfect guest to talk about those things.
Right. So Jennifer Fink was a portrait photographer, but she's retired from that now. And she took care of her mom who had Alzheimer's after her dad died because her dad was her mom's caregiver. And then she became her mom's caregiver.
So another unique thing about Jennifer is she is the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of women who suffered with Alzheimer's or other cognitive impairment. So part of the topics, some of the topics that she discusses on her podcast have to do with health maintenance for good mental health.
Right. Because she really wants to avoid being the fourth generation who has some kind of Alzheimer's or dementia.
Right. So here's our conversation with Jennifer Fink of the Fading Memories podcast.
Jennifer, it is so good to have you on the Heart of Hospice podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. It's one of my goals is to help people understand, especially those of us that have cared for or are caring for somebody with dementia. Hospice is not giving up on your loved one. It's a program that helps you, weather the last few months or sometimes longer. So thanks for having me.
That's awesome. That's a great message to start the podcast with.
Great? I love it. That is good.
So
I've done a few of these.
Yeah, this isn't your first rodeo. That's awesome. No. So what was the catalyst for starting Fading Memories? How did you get started in podcasting?
Well, almost by accident. I was an avid podcast listener from very early on, back when you had to actually listen to podcasts through your web browser. And having, at the time, I was still currently a portrait photographer. And I would be editing portraits with Photoshop and trying to listen to a podcast. And my computer would be like, yo, please find one or the other. These are taking up too much energy. And so I got back into it when, the podcast player apps came out, which was wonderful. My dad did 99% of the caregiving for my mom. He did not want my sister and I to help. I've never really understood why. And after he passed away in March of 2017, and I became responsible for my mom, it was like I didn't have him as the buffer when we were together. And she was very happy just basically sitting around shooting the breeze. And she'd ask me the same question over and over and over. She'd ask me, what have you been up to lately? So I would give her the answer in chunks and then the whole answer. And then after, 20, 25 minutes, it's like, okay. And then she'd ask me again and I was out of answers. And it's just like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way. So I did lots of reading, deep internet research, and I did not find anything that worked with my mom. It was very, very frustrating. So one day, this is in the before times, I was driving to the gym and I was listening to Side Hustle School, and they were talking about how you could use a podcast to promote your business, which had been something I had thought about way back in the early days. My husband's a real estate broker, so I was thinking along the lines of him. And halfway through the gym workout, it was like, duh, flat head, slap your head moment. I need to look for a podcast for Alzheimer's caregivers. Why didn't I think of that before? As a podcast on everything, right? So I go home, I search and search and search through Apple Podcasts. There was one. And I was like, okay, well, she's been doing this a while. Great. And I got into it and it was not my cup of tea. And I've tried and I thought, well, this is very frustrating. I can't be the only person. I mean, I do like to refer to myself as a unicorn. I'm a multi-generational Californian. I'm unique. A lot of special things about me. So I'm like, I'm a unicorn, but I can't be the only one searching for a podcast like this that is not relating to this one. I'm like, why is there one? So I started my own, and it was wonderful because I talked to hundreds of people. I'm still learning things. My mom passed away 2 years ago, last month, March 31st. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm still learning ways of being a better caregiver. So if I feel like if I'm learning things, then my audience is learning things. So I just keep on keeping on.
That's awesome. And what you found was that there was a dearth of good podcasts out there regarding Alzheimer's and dementia. And you filled a gap, and that's great. That's what the world needs right now. Because let's be honest, more and more people are suffering with Alzheimer's and dementia. And their caregivers are finding it very difficult to handle the load that comes with Alzheimer's and dementia. Caregiving for a person with Alzheimer's and dementia is very different than caregiving for patients with other diseases.
Mm-hmm. Because everything fails. Their mind is failing. Many times they already have other health issues that affect them physically. My mom was not one of those, but eventually, their brain forgets that they can walk. Their brain forgets how to eat. Their brain literally forgets to continue running your body. Their brain, somebody with Alzheimer's or other form of dementia, their brain forgets to pump their heart or make them breathe. I mean, it sounds really creepy, but if something else doesn't happen, that's what happens. And that's pretty much, my mom fell and broke her leg. And that was just, her body was like, yep, we're done. And I thought, this might sound really creepy, but when we got her death certificate, I wanted to make sure it said that she died from Alzheimer's because that's what killed her. And, I felt like as a historical document and a legal document, her death certificate needed to be correct. And thankfully it was. I did have to Google the term. Basically, she died from lack of eating and drinking from advanced Alzheimer's. I was like, yes, good. Thank you for getting it right. Because many of them will get, they'll aspirate and they'll get pneumonia or something else happens. So like they'll have a heart attack and that's what's on their death certificate. Well, maybe they had a heart attack because their brain forgot how to run the heart. I kind of feel like there's a lot of deaths from Alzheimer's and other dementias that are way undercounted because it affects everybody so differently that we don't, we may miss what's actually going on, if that makes sense. Like, not sure it makes sense to me, but the brain runs your whole body. So when your brain is not working right, it's the reason that your body fails.
Right.
So that's a great way to start out, huh?
Well, no, that's the perfect description. So the brain is the control center. And if you think about it like a breaker box, right? That's where all your power comes from. But if you flip breaker number 3, then the appliances in your kitchen don't work and the outlets there don't work. So that part of your functioning in your home doesn't work. And as you flip those breakers off one by one, those systems go out. So it makes perfect sense to me. My father-in-law passed away in July of 2021. So it hasn't been quite a year yet as we're recording this. And he had end-stage Alzheimer's. And it is very different from person to person to person. You may have people that have no reality-based conversation, but they can chatter no end. Yeah. Yes. But then you have patients that can only do the 6 words, which is one of the criteria that we look for when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementias, how much verbal ability they have. And then you have patients that can walk and they're hyper and they're wandering risks. And then other folks who struggle just to stand up, That it really looks quite different. And we were talking the other day, there was the numbers released from the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization about what they call diagnosis mix. What diagnoses are we seeing for people that are on hospice care? Alzheimer's and dementias have grown exponentially since, I think, 2008, 2009?
Yes.
It's the only group that has grown like that.
I think part of it might be because it's very difficult to see the early stages of active dying. I mean, if my mom was starting to have problems eating, okay, that's Alzheimer's. You know that. I know that. But at some point, I think after she broke her leg, it was definitely, a sign of her body shutting down, not just Alzheimer's. I mean, she was bedbound because she was not a candidate to do the surgery to repair her leg. She wouldn't do the physical therapy at all. So it was like she needed it regardless if we did the surgery or not. So, and I knew that the anesthesia would probably be it was just not a great idea with somebody whose brain was already severely compromised. But she would literally tap on the bed tray for the food. I mean, her visual processing was garbage for a long time, but she walked until the day she broke her leg. She spoke in English words, what sounded like full sentences with no context. So if somebody came in the middle of what we're talking about, they would understand my words, but not what I was trying to get across because they missed a big chunk. They might catch up, but that's how talking to my mom was like. It was just random sentences that sounded like they should make sense, but didn't.
Yeah, right.
So when I look back, I think some of her, quote, active signs of, not sure she was actively dying before breaking her leg. This is, I'm not sure we'll ever know. She was definitely kind of withdrawing into herself more. She seemed more sad, which is, not a real positive memory. Just very quiet. She her shooting the breeze kind of went out the window. And it was I think she started having hallucinations, although it could have been that, I'm not sure what the term is. You guys can fill it in. But when they're looking up, at one point we were sitting outside and she's looking up and she's like, the lady in the tree. And I'm like, first off, I have crappy vision to start with as well. So I'm like, that tree that's 100 feet away, what are you looking at? And I thought, oh, this is a hallucination. And now I'm wondering if it was that, what do they call that? Like the death vision? Like they see angels?
Visualization, yes.
Yeah. So it may have been that. I don't have any clue. We'll never know. That's the challenge with people with, some sort of cognitive impairment. It's like, maybe it was a sign. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. And so a lot of times people wait way too long because they don't see the signs because they're very hard. And I think a lot of reasons, and one of the other, as I mentioned, my goal is I want people to understand that bringing hospice in does not mean you've just said, that done, throwing my hands up, done with this. No, this is just another chapter, another phase in the whole terrible journey, but it's an important one. Like I follow a young lady on Instagram. Her mom has had a massive decline. She asked mom's primary care physician, was mom a candidate for palliative care or hospice? And the doctor immediately went to hospice. And I was like, hallelujah, because I've had the experience. One of my dad's doctors, when I mentioned hospice, she hung up on me. So that's a whole other problem.
Right.
But This young lady is still doing things. She's still working with her mom. Like her mom is physically capable of walking, but is either afraid to or has forgotten that she's okay to walk. Something has gone on. Mm-hmm. But she's physically strong enough to walk. So her daughter is doing the physical therapy and the exercises and everything. And she even said in her Instagram story, just because we're considering hospice does not mean this is the end. And here's the stuff I'm going to do with my mom. And I was just like, yay,
yeah.
Because that's, if her mom graduates from hospice after 6 months, hallelujah.
Right.
But at this point, they need more assistance. It's just the two of them. So why not?
And we do have patients that I call it beating the rap, You don't qualify, you rally, you improve. There are patients that do that. I wouldn't say that I've ever seen an Alzheimer's or dementia patient do that, but it happens. And you can't generalize. Everybody's journey when it comes to end of life is a little bit different.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. So you've been doing your podcast, Fading Memories, for quite a while now. What are some of the major topics that you talk about on your podcast? What are some of the things that your listeners are looking for?
Well, I talk to probably 90% of my episodes are caregivers like myself who went through the journey or are still in the journey that have created something. Authors, app developers. I've talked to some people recently about a caregiver subscription box. That was really nice. They sent me one. It was like, ooh, I kind of almost want to subscribe to this just for myself, even though technically I'm not caregiving at this point. Everybody's story is different and everybody has like an angle on, when we ran into this situation, this is how I handled it. So I like to look at it as inspirational, but also informative, because that's what I was looking for. Like, how do I have better visits with my mom? Like, I know slamming my head into the wall is not a good idea. That's what I want to do after 20 minutes with her. And I am an avid reader, but you can only read Alzheimer's books for so long before some of them can be pretty heavy. And some of them can, the information is really good, but it's like, it's like studying for a college exam. You can only do that so much. And I didn't have my mom in my home with me. So I'm like, if I feel this way, how is somebody going to do this if their loved one is with them? They're lucky they're going to be able to read 3 pages and retain it. So that was the catalyst also for a podcast versus anything else. I discuss caregiver support, which, like I said, is the inspiration, information, brain health, mindfulness, which is a whole thing I've learned to do effectively since the podcast, because before that it was just woo-woo stuff to me and I can't quiet down and be in the moment very easily. So I've learned different techniques and aging well, because yes, as caregivers, we want to do the best we can for our loved one, but we have to take care of ourselves too, because, nobody wants to be in this position of having to be cared for as an adult, although 70% of us will need care before we die. So have conversations with your family members, please. Make plans ahead of time. Don't assume that you're in that 30%, because that 30% might be a sudden death, an accidental death, It doesn't mean you went to sleep and didn't wake up. That's not 30% of the population. So we need to have conversations with our family and our friends. This is what I want at the end of life, and if I need care. And don't assume you're going to live in a single family home for the rest of your life, because suburbs are not set up for people who can't drive. Single family homes are not generally set up for people who need physical care. It's a lot of stuff. We talk about everything. If it interests me, we talk about it.
Well, caregiving is pretty varied. And when you talk about, Alzheimer's, dementia, people who struggle with Alzheimer's and dementia, their symptoms look different. Everybody's journey is a little bit different. So their caregiving journey is a little bit different too. Their needs are a little bit different. And I love it. I absolutely love it that you're telling people to have these conversations in advance, because one of the things we know is, first of all, people don't have the conversations at all. Nope. Second of all, they don't have them early enough, and they don't have them frequently enough, because one and done is not enough. You have to have time to digest and then come back and update as your health changes. Maybe the caregiver's health changes. So upstream conversations are super important. One of the things that we see happen in hospice is caregivers promise things they can't do.
Yep.
Yes.
I'll never put you in a home.
Right.
Oh, yes. That's the worst one.
Right. I can't manage your behavior now, but I'm never going to put you anywhere, even though it's not safe. And of course, that's not a realistic promise.
Nope. My husband is a foot taller than me. So at some point, if he needed care, I would not physically be able to do it.
Right.
So I would either have to bring somebody in, which is extremely expensive, And a lot of times the care recipient's like, yeah, no, especially because most care providers, paid care providers are female. So finding a male caregiver to help like your male person, spouse, father, whatever, like shower and stuff, that's really tricky. And like, who the hell wants a stranger coming in their house and giving them a shower? I mean, no thanks.
Right.
I'll take care of it myself, but I can't. And that's kind of what happened with my mom. The more help she needed, the honorier she got, and the less she accepted it. It was terrible. And the two things that I frequently point out about moving somebody into a memory care community is my mom had friends. She had people that did not care that she repeated the same dang story over and over and over. And I was able to be primarily she thought of me as her best friend. So, but I was not her 100% care person. You know, we could kind of go back to our previous relationship, which would have been mother-daughter, but she thought I was her best friend. So, you know, could have been worse. But I like to tell the story. My mom's name was Diane. She befriended another gal named Diane. And the two of them befriended a third Diane.
No.
We referred to them as Diane, and other Diane. Because I'd ask my mom, where's your friend Diane? I'm Diane. I know you're Diane, but the other Diane, your friend that lives down where? It was like
who's
bonkers.
on first? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And there was one day when other Diane, my mom had her dog half the time she lived in the memory care. And seeing the dog, they were talking about a stuffed animal. And my mom launches into this story about how when she was pregnant with her oldest one, which happened to be me, my mother-in-law said, now you're going to be getting rid of the dogs, right?
Oh, my
I still don't need to
goodness.
hear that story. And her friend interrupted her and said, You've told me that story 803 times. And I thought, oh, that's a very specific number. And then a couple months later, we were outside and they had a beautiful courtyard. My mom launches into the story. The next thing I know, other Diane is parroting it. And I thought, hello, you both have Alzheimer's. How many times has my mother told this woman this story that she can now parrot it back? Is this elder abuse? I don't know. I mean, I was just like shocked and I was laughing and I'm like, this is Twilight Zone. This is total Twilight Zone.
Right.
So your mother's story became other Diane's story for her to repeatedly tell. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But then I would do things like I would take both of them to the regional park and we would walk and people were like, are you insane? I'm like, they talk to each other. I can interject. I can listen to them babble about the same stupid tree for 20 minutes. I can think about other things. You know, it's like I'm not 100% part of the conversation. And it's easier for me to have two of them versus one. And then people would joke. And you bring them back? Yes, I think the Rangers would find me and make me come back and pick them up.
Somebody would come looking for you.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, you know, there are days, but
Right.
Well, who says that Alzheimer's and dementia, people with Alzheimer's and dementia don't need socialization?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't have had that had my dad just assumed she'd come live with me. My dad died March 2nd, 2017. My daughter had moved out February 1st, 2017. It's like, and I was 50. I'm like, no. First off, I know one or both of us will be dead by the end of the week. And my dogs hated her dog. I mean, my dog who would literally lay on my feet or wrapped around my office chair. If mom's dog entered the house, he'd be like, I have golden retrievers. So he would be like, oh, hell, poof, out the door. And he'd literally go sleep in the dog yard.
Wow.
I'm like, we can't have mom's dog here either because, no.
Yeah.
So I knew that wouldn't work. I'm like, when you start looking around your house and you realize all of the things you have to change, like we had a gas range and you could literally just lean against it, just stand in the kitchen talking, poof, flames on.
Right.
We backed up to 300 acres of open space. I had no idea what my mom might decide to do with that. She probably wouldn't have wandered, but what if she did? My husband and I both worked. But yeah, it was really quite a very good situation. I acted as if I was the team captain of mom's care team. I never expected the staff at the home to do things for me or drop what they're doing and handle something that I thought mom needed at the moment, because those places beforehand they were borderline understaffed. And I watched other family members be a little bossy, maybe is a nice way of putting it, a little demanding. And I thought, you're going to leave and they're dealing with your loved one. Maybe you shouldn't act like that. Plus, they're not here for you. Yes, you're paying a tremendous amount of money. And yes, you may want something different. But like the people who complained the most seem to have the most things to complain about. I just there was a day my mom and I were walking out the door. Her blouse slipped off her shoulder. And I was like, well, I wonder whose black sports bra you're wearing. It's like, I could have pitched a fit, but what the hell? It's like, it was like, whatever. I'm just not even going to think about it. It's like, she was clean. She was dressed. Okay. So the laundry got a little mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It happened. Yeah. So these are just the things that are, we have to adjust our expectations, and it's hard because, we want the best for them, and, wearing somebody else's clothes, not necessarily with the best, but it's just the way it is.
We wanted to take a moment to remind you that the mission of the Heart of Hospice is to be an advocate for quality end-of-life care. One way we do that is by providing education and consulting for hospice and palliative care professionals. The leadership of the Heart of Hospice has over 20 years of combined hospice experience. We can provide training for your interdisciplinary team through webinars and virtual events on topics such as self-care and grief management for professionals, diversity, competency, and healthy boundaries, or a topic of your choice. If you need a speaker for a leadership or community event, please contact us at host@theheartofhospice.com. Now back to today's episode.
Jennifer, what do you think are 3 things that an Alzheimer's caregiver needs to know?
You cannot do this alone, period. End of chapter, end of book. In the beginning, it's manageable. But then eventually you find yourself up to your eyebrows in, holy hell, what am I doing? What happened to my life? And it can happen quickly, or it can happen very slowly, kind of like slowly drowning. So what I always tell anybody that will listen, that doesn't run away from me when I start this conversation, is put a care team in place right now. I don't care how easy it is. I don't care if your loved one can still drive. They're still navigating the world pretty well. Do it now. And this is how I tell people to do it. Make a list, sit down today and write down, here are the things that I have to do today to manage my household. My husband was gone for a little over a week. So it's just me and the 2 dogs. Should be easy, right? Holy Toledo. Like, got to take out the trash, got to make sure the dogs are fed, got to make sure they get their joint treats. I mean, it's like managing the household is not super easy, even if one of us is gone. So write down all of the responsibilities that you need to take care of today so that you can get from the morning to the evening with no issues. And then do the same thing for here's my weekly responsibilities and any monthly responsibilities. And now here's all the stuff that needs to be done in addition to helping this person that's suffering a terminal brain illness. Then make a list of everybody you know and write down what you think is their, not trait, but their best skill. For example, my husband is a real estate broker. He spent 20 years in banking. The man speaks bank. He does not object to being on hold forever. I mean, he doesn't like it, but literally after 2 minutes, I'm losing my mind. I'm angry and that's talking to insurance companies and banks. It's not something I do. Do not speak that language. Don't want to do it. And so don't ask me to set up your online banking or call and check about mom's Medicare or whatever, because I am not the gal for that. But you need meals, you need whatever. I might be the gal for that. So write down what you think somebody could help you with, even somebody that doesn't live nearby. Maybe John from out of town can set up your online banking and make sure your bill, monitor bill paying for you and your loved one, just as kind of like a backup from across the country or different country even. So make that list. Now, when somebody says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear your mom has Alzheimer's. Is there anything I can do to help? Bing, you have an answer.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And you're not expecting somebody to like wipe your loved ones behind or wrestle them into the shower. You're asking them for a specific thing. You know, can you provide like one meal a week? That would really help me a lot. Oh, sure. Not a problem. We love cooking in this household. Again, don't ask me to call the bank because I'm not doing that. I'd rather cook for you. And because you're giving them a very specific answer and it's something that they're comfortable with doing, then they don't feel like, well, if I offer, I might get sucked in and I got all these other responsibilities. And that's why people don't offer help, because they don't know what to offer. And they're afraid that they're going to get sucked into your drama, for lack of a better term. So if you make it easy for them to say yes, everybody wins. That enough for 3?
Yeah, I think there were 3 in there. You know, creating a caregiving village is one thing, but doing it early on and identifying the needs before somebody asks you. And I really like the idea of somebody who can help remotely.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we forget about that. A lot of caregivers in the United States are remote caregivers because, you know, in the culture that we have these days, 2022, people move around, they move away, they relocate, they transfer, that sort of thing. And you have children and family members who could be helpful, but only through online means. Well, there's a ton of stuff you can do. I've never thought about that before, but that's actually really smart.
Well, I learned that from another podcaster who, let's see, his mom, it's complicated because we're talking about 3 different generations. So grandpa threw up the white flag and said, I can't do this anymore. And to his children, so the podcaster's mom and aunts and uncles, will you please go research and find care homes for mom? So they did that. And this family needs like whatever caregiver Oscar, because I have never run across other families that have been this awesome. So they basically all came together. They had a family meeting. They said, you know, what are you good at? What do you feel comfortable doing? So it was a similar technique to what I just suggested, only they discussed it among themselves. So that's also an option. You know, if you can sit down with your village and have that conversation of, you know, hey, Jen, can you call the insurance companies? Hell no. You want some cookies? You want some nice meatloaf or stroganoff? But the hubby can maybe call the banks and the insurance companies. That's where I got that information. But they basically formed what they called their care committee. So the siblings, the kids, like I said, so generation 2, so the offspring of mom who needed more care, they all did their thing. The grandchildren all added to, you know, so they were supporting the people that were supporting the grandma. Like I said, it's very hard to explain. And eventually, before grandma died, one of her sisters who had never married or had children also ended up with Alzheimer's. So they expanded their care committee to take care of great aunt, grandma's sister. And at one point in the conversation in the podcast episode that I did with this particular person, they said they were kind of joking, but they really wanted to like legalize this committee as like a board of directors kind of thing and put it, I don't know, that's a whole complicated thing, but that is how detailed and specific they were about navigating care. And I mean, the podcaster that I was interviewing with his mom, he had young children. He didn't have time to like dedicate a whole day to his grandmother, even though he may have wanted to, because he had his own job and his podcast and his family. And, you know, we do like to do fun things for ourselves as well. So that's where I learned that. And I massaged it so that you could do it even if you can't sit down and face to face with everybody and have these conversations. But yeah, that's like I said, I've learned so much from my own podcast that I'm still learning. So I'm sure other people are as well.
I think we're learning from you too.
Definitely. So since you've had this caregiving experience and looking back on it, what would you have changed? What would you have done differently?
Well, I really wish I could have gotten my dad to do what I just suggested, getting more people involved early on. Because, like I said, he didn't even accept help from my sister and I, the children of my mother, so there was that. Thankfully, it's changed a lot, but people didn't talk about Alzheimer's. You kind of dealt with it by yourself. I'm a Gen Xer. And so I get to be in between the baby boomers who are like, I can't believe these people are putting their loved ones all over the internet, and the millennials who are putting their family all over the internet. And it's kind of interesting to be in between those two generations, because I was kind of a hybrid. Like, I didn't put a lot of videos and things about my mom on the internet until I realized people really needed to understand what advanced Alzheimer's looked like. Well, I wasn't with her every day. So I didn't do stuff every day like these younger caregivers do. And, man, some of them are super transparent about everything. So that's been a benefit because, we're having more conversations. We're having more understanding. The general population is going to have to understand how to deal with people like my mom, like you said, it was your father-in-law who passed away.
Yes.
And even tangentially, I think I could say that right, like people with autism. We were camping. There was a family next to us, and probably late teens, early 20s young man. And it was obvious to me that he probably had autism. And I know better now. I understand it. So it's not odd and a little disconcerting. So I just look over at them because he was making noises. He was nonverbal. And I just smile. And I thought, if he comes over here, I'll just talk to him the same way I talk to my mom, because he needs to be social too. He needs to be accepted too. And so that's what's better about now versus when my mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years. So in 20 years, it has changed so much. But we need to start having conversations about things like infrastructure. Like we tell people, well, you can't drive your car anymore. Well, that is the only way to get anything done in California, because we are so big and so populous that if you cannot hop into your car and pay $500 billion for gas right now, I am so happy I have a hybrid right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
Paying off now. But, it's like, I can't walk to the grocery store. It's not an option. So we need to start thinking about our population is aging. We all want to age well. We all want to stay in our homes. We don't want diseases. So what can we do to fix this? And I think a lot of these conversations that caregivers are starting to have will help that. So to answer the question more directly, is what I wish I knew then is that it was okay to talk about it. It was okay to tell people that this really sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is very hard, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, seriously, if you're talking about the generations that are more removed from, so say you typically take an older person, not the early onset dementia, which is a much younger person, but an older person. So maybe their children are caring for them, and then there may be grandchildren around, nieces and nephews. So if we limit the caregiving village, your care committee, I love that. If we limit that, then aren't we really depriving a younger generation of experiencing? Because so say my mom, who's still living, my sister and my brother and I are her care committee. But we involve our kids, right? Because she enjoys the heck out of them. She has no mental decline. She's got physical issues, but she enjoys the heck out of her grandchildren and now her great-grandchildren. She loves that. And so they interact with her and they see what her mobility needs are and how she needs help. And then all of a sudden, I hear this volunteer. I'm going over there to program Margie's DVD player for her because she doesn't know how to do it, or I'm going to help her, set up her TV, something like that. And that's coming from the grandkids. And I love that because my generation, when we get to be my mom's age, those are the people that are going to be caring for us. So I would really like it if we didn't have some of those rookie mistakes that I happen to be the victim of.
Right.
No, seriously. So if we teach those generations that are further out, why wouldn't we teach our young people how to care for their grandparents?
Well, and young people also, especially like, you would think that maybe you need to shield toddlers and early kindergarten or first graders, so pretty young children. It's like, we know as adults that this Alzheimer's, this is a horrible, horrible thing. And so instinctively we would want to protect the young children from this horrible, horrible thing. But I have seen videos of toddlers that can feed an older adult, that can entertain an older adult. Those of us that are moms or parents might remember like the times that the kid wanted to do the same thing over and over and over. And it's like, again, you want to bang your head into the wall before you have to watch another episode of Barney or whatever. I should tell you how old my daughter is. But there's an overlap as our children's abilities improve and the older adults' abilities decline. They have they meet in the middle somewhere, and they're kind of on the same level. And so they can entertain each other. I watched a video of a young lady. So her aunt is taking care of the grandmother. So it's the aunt's grandmother. And I guess the other gal's great grandmother. I don't know. Like, family trees are hard for me. And she literally was carrying like a cup of colored pencils because grandma likes to color. And she would fake trip and spill the pencils. And she'd be like, oh no, ha ha ha. Oh, Grams, can you help me with the pencil? And she did it like 5 times. I'm like, geez, once. And I'd feel like an idiot and not want to do it again. Like, get out of my head, because why? I mean, if I'm entertaining her, why do I care if I look silly? But it gave her aunt, the caregiver, a little break. It made grandma smile. I mean, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, it's like, she didn't care if she looked silly because she's a kid and she was doing kid stuff and grandma loved it. So it's like, we need to involve kids because of what you were saying. It's like you're training your future caregivers. So think about that one.
Sure.
I'm going to have to remember that phraseology. But it will help all of society if people are not afraid of something that's different. We're not afraid of somebody who's in a wheelchair or somebody who's got autism or Alzheimer's or is missing an arm or a leg or whatever. If we just normalize that humans are all different, we don't all look the same. So some people look a little more different than, other people. I think that would be a very serious benefit to everybody on the planet.
Yeah, definitely. So it's obvious you have a lot of good information to share on your Fading Memories podcast. Where can our listeners go to hear your podcast?
Fading Memories is on absolutely every podcast player you could ever think of. I didn't even know there was so many until the audio host I used spread me everywhere. I'm like, I should check and see. Yep, I'm on that one too. Never even heard of them. You can also go to my website, which is fadingmemoriespodcast.com. Apologies for the super long URL. Quick story. I went to buy fadingmemories.com. It was about lunchtime. I click on the, place where you go buy, domain names. And I was like, looking at the computer screen going, I must be hungry. I'm going to go have some lunch, because that seriously doesn't say $35,000+. No.
Wow.
So then I went and had lunch and I came back and I'm like, yeah, it does say it's almost $36,000. Yeah, we will not be doing that. Because there is a band, a movie, and a book by that name. I'm like, never heard of any of them. I've never run across any of that, but apparently I'm not the first Fading Memories on the planet. And I had to add podcast to the end of the URL so that I could afford it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense.
I'm old school because, I'm 55 at this point. Like I said, Gen Xer. I was like, well, do I use .org or .info or .help, or like, does anybody even know those extensions exist? So I'm like, I'm not an organization, so it's got to be .com. So I even have to typing that URL is a pain in the butt.
Well, we'll make sure we have links to your podcast, to your website in the show notes so our listeners can go straight to it and connect with the work that you're doing. We're so grateful to you. So grateful.
Thank you. Maybe one of these days we can have a conversation on how we can help people that are caregiving for somebody with Alzheimer's understand when it's time to start contemplating hospice.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, we should do that. We should do that sometime. Jennifer, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. This has been very, very informative. We're thankful to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Wow, she's got so much good information to share with people when it comes to being a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia.
And she inherited her mom's care from her dad. Interestingly enough, her dad wouldn't let Jennifer or her sister help with the caregiving responsibilities.
Right.
So when her dad was no longer there to do it, they were basically reinventing her mom's caregiving system.
Right.
Which, I mean, Jennifer obviously acknowledged that probably wasn't the best thing, right? It would have been better for her dad to let the kids help. But such great advice involving a village, creating this care committee early on, which I would say is a universal caregiver thing, right? Not just for someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia.
Yeah. She talked about one way that you could always get the help you need is to sit down and write down all the things that you do. What are the things that you do where you need help or you could use some help at some point? And then when somebody comes along who says, well, if you ever need anything,
well, now that you mention it, and I think it takes some of the energy out of it because it takes mental energy, emotional energy for a caregiver to have to summon up. If I say, how can I help you? That's just another mental task you have to figure out. But if you have a list, here are the things that we do every day. The garbage goes out twice a week, or the dog has to be bathed every 2 weeks, or whatever it is. We do a grocery run every 7 days, something like that. But you have a list of those household tasks. You don't have to recall that. I think a lot of times caregivers, especially as the acuity of their loved one gets worse, they don't have the mental energy to sum it up and figure that out. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor and you say, okay, I have 10 things I want to ask the doctor. And then when you get in there, you're under pressure. The doctor's standing there. He's got a white coat and you've got about 5 minutes of his attention, if that. And then all of a sudden he says, do you have any questions? You say, no.
Like you can't remember even one of them.
It's just too much pressure. So I think there's a lot of pressure and there's added burden when it comes to a caregiver having to come up with ways that somebody could help. Because if you ask me right there on the fly, right in the moment, I would probably say, we're okay right now. We're okay for now. I hear people say that kind of thing all the time. But if you have a list, the other thing it does is when people make an offer, how can I help you? They don't necessarily want to turn down if you say, can you fix us a meal 2 nights a week? Maybe I don't cook.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe that's not my thing. And they don't want to say no.
Yeah. So that was the other list that she said you should make. Make a list of the people who could help and list their skills. What are they good at?
Right. What are their gifts? Like the remote caregiving. Can you do the online banking setup for us?
Right. Yeah. They don't have to be present. They are with them to be able to do things like that. So there are some things that can be done remotely, which honestly, for me, that was very enlightening because I am a remote caregiver for my dad. I live 800 miles away. There's a lot of things that I just cannot do, but there are some things that I can do.
Well, think how it expands the caregiving village, right? It doesn't just have to be people there in your neighborhood, your church, your family, your friends that are immediately in your area. You got somebody that lives 800 miles away. If they can set something up online or go through resumes online, if you're looking for a hired caregiver, things like that, phone calls, online stuff, web-based research, there are definitely things you can do. She had some really good ideas. She learned her lessons the hard way, for sure. And I love the way she acknowledged up front that there were certain things about her mom's symptoms that drove her up the wall.
Right.
Yeah. So having patience with certain things like repeating the same questions, having the same conversations over and over, obsession with certain things where it's repetitive, it really is exhausting for a caregiver to have to deal with that kind of stuff.
That's right. And
she was very open.
And it's typical for Alzheimer's patients to do that.
Yes, it is.
Very typical. So we would encourage you, our listeners, to check out her podcast called the Fading Memories Podcast. It's on every platform.
Yeah,
so,
you can find her wherever you listen.
Exactly. So take a look, and we'll also have a link in the show notes to her website where you can check that out as well and get more information about her. But we appreciate Jennifer and thank her for being on our podcast.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer here with Jerry Fenter. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and please take a minute to leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts.
You can connect with us by just sending an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You can also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.